Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Lorianne Stretch, and I'm at William and Mary. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, commonly known as HIPAA. So I am going to provide you with the basic overview of HIPAA, also talk about some of the tools that you have access to as a practitioner to help you stay in compliance with HIPAA. And finally, some of the changes that we're anticipating to update HIPAA in 2021. So I am going to share my screen and walk you through the handouts, which I hope you have, so that you can have a better understanding of HIPAA. If you have questions that you would like to follow up with, don't hesitate to email me and ask me what those are. If I don't have an answer, I probably know a resource that will provide you with the answer, or I can connect you with somebody else who might have the answer if I don't. So let's get started. First, we're going to take a look at the handout, and then we've got a video or two to watch and some diagrams and such to help you understand the concepts. So here's my information if you need to reach me. And let's talk a little bit about HIPAA. So HIPAA and high tech. So HIPAA was signed into law in 1996. Its biggest update occurred in 2013 with the introduction of HIPAA Omnibus Final Rule updates. In 2020, the Health and Human Services Secretary issued an order that said that OCR was not going to be fully enforcing HIPAA and that they were going to waive some of the penalties related to HIPAA during the COVID-19 nationwide public health emergency. I would caution all of the behavioral health practitioners that we still need to be abiding by HIPAA and protecting our clients' information. Under the American Counseling Association Code of Ethics and several other codes of ethics, we have a responsibility to protect our clients and to have the highest standard of confidentiality and protection in place. We also have state laws which will continue to be enforced. So it's really important to use technology in ways that will protect your client's information. So what are the components of HIPAA? Well, the three major components: the privacy rule, which includes the patient uses and disclosures, the patient bill of rights, and the administrative requirements. So this is what we tell our clients and how we get information from our clients to know that they have seen their rights. The security rule is the administrative safeguards, technical safeguards, and the physical safeguards. So this is how we protect. This is the technology behind what we're doing to protect our clients' information. Finally, you have high tech, which is our breach notification, audits, and enforcement. So when HIPAA first came out, it didn't really have an enforcement component. And so they passed high tech in order to give more enforcement options for health and human services in case there were breaches or people did things that weren't protecting client information. Now, we also have the HIPAA and ACA, American Affordable Care Act, and we have the simplification overview. I'm going to actually share a video with you that's going to help explain some of the basic components of administrative simplification, but I can tell you that as a private practitioner, one of my greatest frustrations when I first started my practice is that I could call a health insurance company and they would start out their conversation with me like, we can't guarantee that this is really what's going to happen. And the administrative simplification rules really forces insurance companies, for one, to have to give accurate and information that will help a provider determine if certain services are going to be covered or not. And it also centralized some of that information, in the format of what that information would be like became much more consistent. So let's take a look at that video, and then we will come back and talk some more about other components of HIPAA.
Welcome to CMS eHealth. As a provider, you know that too much time spent on paperwork can mean less time for patients. Every year, the United States spends billions of dollars on healthcare administration alone. Our goal is to reduce that cost by making the administrative side of healthcare more efficient. For example, we want to make it easier for providers and health plans to share administrative information electronically. And that's the goal of administrative simplification. Let's start with the what, how, and why of operating rules and standards. What do operating rules do? They set certain requirements for transactions between entities that are covered by the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, or HIPAA. How do they work? They specify the information that must be included when conducting standard transactions. And here's the why. Operating rules make it easier for providers to use electronic means to make administrative transactions. We'll look at 4 different kinds of administrative transactions and their associated operating rules and standards. The first 2 transactions deal with eligibility for a health plan and with claim status. The operating rules for these transactions have been in effect since January 1st, 2013. What this means to you, the provider, is that you should be able to check on a patient's eligibility or the status of a claim over the internet. But this rule is about more than just convenience. It increases efficiency by reducing back and forth communication and the extra time spent chasing down information. That's because under this rule, health plans are required to respond to your eligibility questions with details about a patient's coverage, like the deductible and allowable charges for specific services. This standard also makes both the information and the way it's transmitted more uniform, so that providers can use just one type of electronic request for all insurers, instead of using many different systems. Our third transaction is the Healthcare Electronic Funds Transfers, or EFT, and remittance advice. That's the electronic payment that a health plan sends to the bank to pay provider claims. Accompanying every EFT is an ERA, or electronic remittance advice. An ERA is what health plans send to providers to describe what a healthcare payment is for. You might think of it as a transaction processing summary. So, how do the administrative simplification operating rules and standards affect EFT and ERA? They specify both the format and the data content of each transaction. This will simplify the process of signing up for EFT and automate payment reconciliation for providers. To find out more, go to the eHealth website and look for Administrative Simplification under the Programs tab.
So hopefully that helped you understand a little bit about the newest rule, the Administrative Simplification Overview. Now let's take a look at a HIPAA high-tech roadmap. So the first thing that we need to be concerned about is risk analysis. Where are our gaps? Where are the potential for information to be released without the client's permission? Then we need to create policies. What are the policies that we're going to implement in order to be sure that things don't happen, and that if something does happen and there is a breach, how are we going to handle that? We also need to train and document. That's our own training and documenting that training, but we also need to train any staff or potentially any business partners that we're working with if they haven't already received that training. We need to implement security features, and then we need to evaluate our process on a regular basis, possibly annually, in order to determine that we are staying compliant and that we also are protecting client information. Now, the 4 types of breaches that can happen. So you'll see there's a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4. Tier 1 is I wasn't aware. I had no idea that was a risk. Oh my goodness. But I'm going to correct it, right? Here's a tier 2. I probably should have known that that was a potential risk, but I didn't. And as soon as I knew it, I fixed it. Here's willful neglect tier, which is corrected, which means that the person intentionally didn't do something or breach something or somebody stole something, and that was corrected as soon as it was brought into awareness. Tier 4 is the more serious one where there was willful neglect and it wasn't corrected. In fact, they may have tried to hide it or deny it, and that can result in much higher cost for the individuals who are violating HIPAA. And you can see that as the tiers increase, so do the penalties associated with those. Now, what type of breaches? I wanted to give you a comparison between 2015 and 2019. So you can see that healthcare providers and health plans shared the bulk of breaches in 2015, and that healthcare providers had the bulk of those breaches in 2017, with a little less with the others. Who was impacted or how they were impacted. So you were in 2015, you can see the bulk of a lot of the breaches were due to hacking and IT. Interestingly, by 2017, just 2 years later, there was a greater increase in theft and also unauthorized disclosure and improper disposal, but still a lot of hacking and IT issues. And then what type of information, or where was the information when it was breached? You can see in 2015, fairly distributed across lots of different possibilities, paper being the largest. That could be where something was misfiled in a paper file, and then the file was copied for disclosure, and there might be somebody else's information in there, or it might have been sent to the wrong place. But in 2017, you can see network servers and email had quickly become major concerns. And that's why you see a lot of cyber phishing type of trainings that are out there to help people stay compliant. Now, what does it mean to be HIPAA compliant? We use that term a lot, but actually it's a little bit of a misnomer, because no single individual and no single software product can be HIPAA compliant. It takes a process, and that process involves 2 or more individuals, because HIPAA is all about the transmission of information, and that is what we're talking about. And so in order for a process to be HIPAA compliant, there needs to be the required physical, network, and process security measures in place and followed. So for example, free Skype tends to, or is not HIPAA compliant, because the free version of Skype basically bounces from computer to computer to computer to transmit that information. Clearly, that's not a secure way of communicating when you're communicating protected health information. So instead, we'd want to use things like a HIPAA compliant Zoom account, or VC, or DoxyMe, or something like that, that has the ability, the physical ability to transmit information in a way that's secure. We also need to be on an appropriate network. So if I'm on a secured VPN or a secured business network, that's probably a better choice than, say, even a personal internet that other people have access to, and say my home. One of the things that I really like to caution people about is making sure that you're never transmitting any type of protected health information in a free Wi-Fi situation, such as, say, Starbucks or the airport. I'd much rather you use your data plan on your cell phone than try to use any of the free networks. Just a little side note, you shouldn't also be doing any financial information exchange on a free network. It's a very bad idea, like checking your bank while you're at the airport. Bad idea. And then finally, you need process security measures. And those are the processes that are in place to protect information. Like, do you have people log when they check out a file? Do you have people punch in a code at the copier to retrieve printed materials? What are the processes, and what's the training for those processes? And what happens if those processes aren't followed? All of that needs to be in place. And these rules apply to both covered entities and our business associates. And we're going to describe what those are in just a little bit. But first, I think we need to understand what protected health information is, or PHI. And this is any information in a medical record that can be used to identify a person. And there are 18 protected health information identifiers through the National Institutes of Health. And I have those listed here for you. Now, oftentimes people are a little surprised to see things like web URLs or IP addresses, but these are things that you can use to track back to other people. I think some of these other ones, like Social Security, phone, address, characteristics of the individual, Those things we're not so surprised about, but a few of these more technical things might be a little surprising. But all of these are protected under federal law, and we need to be careful about how we transmit that information. Now, covered entities are required to give clients a HIPAA rights notice. Now, you may have noticed that some agencies have you sign that you have received that. Now, the law says that we just have to provide this to our clients. It doesn't really say that we have to have them sign off on it or anything like that, but we do have to have it posted. That's the minimal necessary. But I would suggest that having a written acknowledgement, at least, of receiving those or having access to those is a good practice, a best practice to do in the field. Now, a couple of things. When HIPAA was updated in 2013, there were some additions that were added to the statement. And I've noticed in some of my own doctor visits and also in some of my consulting work that the notice of privacy rights has not always been updated since the first time that HIPAA passed. And I would suggest that we need to stay current. We need to pay attention to the changes that are happening. And I'm going to show you some resources a little later that will help you do that. But these 4 statements need to be included in the statement's privacy rights. And so you want to make sure that these are included if you have a privacy disclosure form that you share with your client. Now, how do you know if you're a covered agency or covered healthcare? Do you, as a person, business, or agency, furnish or bill or receive payment for healthcare in the normal course of business? If yes, then you go here. Does the person, business, or agency transmit any covered transactions electronically? Chances are yes, because we do pretty much everything electronically now. Email, phone, video, fax, which is kind of going out with the date, but having an electronic portal where clients upload information or share protected health information, all of that's transmission. And so we need to be really cautious about what we do. And I say that it is probably better to follow HIPAA and not be required to than to mistakenly think you're not covered and really you are. So you want to make sure that you're utilizing these tools and resources because, hey, it's just great practice to protect your client's information. And we have an ethical obligation, if not a legal one, to do so. Now let's talk what a business associate is. Now, oftentimes when I present this seminar live, I'll ask people to name who they work with that has access to information about their clients. And some of the common responses are bookkeeper, CPA, potentially janitorial service, financial institutions, your IT support, somebody who's doing your billing. All of these are good answers, but not all of them apply. So for example, my bookkeeper has access to my client information, but my CPA doesn't, because I just provide my CPA with summary report. So my CPA doesn't need to have a BAA necessarily with me, but my bookkeeper might or does. My janitorial service probably doesn't need to have that, because if everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, then they shouldn't be seeing information. But I also know when I had a larger agency and had a lot of different people working there, that didn't always happen. So I did have my janitorial service sign a BAA, and I actually provided the training for their agency in exchange for them guaranteeing that only people who had been trained would be able to clean my office. And so a business associate is anybody who performs any type of interaction with your business and has access to that protected health information. Now, your financial institutions are going to be under a different set of rules that are actually more extreme than even HIPAA. So we don't have to worry about our banks or things like that. But we do have to worry about those individuals who are helping us or accessing our information about our clients directly for the purpose of supporting the business that we're doing. So I have some additional information, some decision tools to help you here. And these tools will help you decide if the person that you're working with, if they should have a BAA or not with you. Now, one of the beautiful things about a BAA is that the Health and Human Services has already written it for you. And so there is a page, I'm going to share that right here on the Health and Human Services page, which will give you a lot of really good information about business associates and give you access to information, including a contract that you can use in order to create a business associate agreement. So you don't need to recreate that. You can actually just click in here and get information about that and actually get a copy of the contract that the Health and Human Services recommends. All right, and then here's some questions that you might want to ask whenever you're trying to select a vendor and kind of what to be aware of and how they answer. So I always like this one, right? If, you know, can we review your risk assessment? And they say, I don't have one, then you need to run. You need to think about how you're going to ask these questions and what the answers are going to be and how you're going to use those answers to help inform your decision. Now, under HIPAA, we also need to conduct self-audits, and this is really just a process where we're doing that risk assessment that we saw in the HIPAA roadmap. We want to identify, you know, kind of how are we going to remediate when we find gaps? What are our policies, our procedures? All that needs to be written down and accessible to any employees. And, you know, sometimes you may even want to share that with your business associates. Documentation. How are you managing your business associates? How are you checking their audits? How are you making sure that they're staying current? And then are you updating these annually? And then any incidents that happen. And here's a great blog that will help you get more information about that. Now we're going to finish up with our HIPAA high-tech toolbox. And this is just kind of a tour of all of these links that I have here. And so I'm going to show you some of those. I'm going to bring those over. So first, we have the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. This is a page on the administrative simplification. So that's a great resource. And then we also have this guide, which is a little older, 2015, but still a goodie. And this is the Guide to Privacy and Security of Health, Electronic Health Information. It's a really useful tool broken up by chapters so that you can look at information and see. I really like this resource. And then we also have the regional extension centers, which are great resource centers that can help you when you're trying to be sure that you're being HIPAA compliant and identifying resources and helping you identify appropriate electronic resources. Here's another one, the Health IT Playbook. Again, an oldie but a goodie. It gives tons of information here. You can click on these different chapters and it'll walk you through resources and terms and overviews and fact sheets. It's really awesome. Old but good. Okay, and then we have just this hhs.gov website, Health Information Privacy. You can see there are a ton of resources along the side here that are really helpful. So some of the ones that really stood out for me when I'm thinking about our work, right, is there's one that is specifically dedicated to the information related to mental health and including opiate overdoses. So there's a lot of PDFs here and FAQs to help if you're dealing with the treatment of individuals because there's slightly different rules for substance use disorders. And then there are specific pages that just like you said, go over the privacy rule or the security rule. And then finally, for those of you that might be in school-based settings, there's one here that explains when and how you would be covered by FERPA and HIPAA and what the differences are. So that's a really good one. And then also here's some audit protocol that I think is really helpful when you're doing your own audits. Let's see. Here's another tool that I have listed there that covers about covered entity guidance. So who's a covered entity? And then finally, this is another one that I really like. And this is a audit tool that is available to you. It's not supported as well as it used to be, but it is definitely available. And I do think it's a great tool for helping you create your own audit. And then the APA also has some resources like this privacy page. And then I'm trying to see, and then there's also the HIPAA journal, which is a public access, open access journal that keeps up to date. This is one of my go-tos for when I'm trying to find out kind of what's happening and what the rules are. So I hope that those are some helpful resources, and you have links for all of these in the handouts. So we're going to get back to the handout. All right, and finally, I wanted to talk about some of the proposed changes that are coming up for 2020. These have been under review, I think, since 2019. And the goal is really to make this less burdensome and to help us be able to more effectively communicate information. It also is going to give patients or clients much more access to their records, and it's going to make it a little harder for us to deny them access especially when there's concerns, although we technically still can. It does allow clients to inspect their PHI in person, and they can take notes or photographs of their PHI. It changes a timeline we have. So instead of 30 days, it will change it to 15. Now, none of this has been implemented yet. These are still proposed changes. Restricting the right of individuals to transfer to third party. So if I get information from somebody else about a client, I can't then pass that information on. I also need to confirm that individuals permitted to direct a covered entity to send their PHI if they request. It's talking about when we should provide PHI and transmission of information without a charge. It also requires that individual entities inform individuals that they have the right to obtain copies of their information, gives some more access to armed forces, and also provides a definition of electronic health records, some wording changes, also looking at that we won't need to require the written acknowledgement. We'll just have to have it posted, although this is still a best practice. And then you will have to post an estimated fee schedule on your websites, and then estimated fees, and some of these other ones here, so that, you know, basically we're trying to work in good faith. So there are some changes that are being proposed, like I said, but those have not taken effect yet. But I do think it's important to stay current and maybe monitor the HIPAA journal, for example, so that you can see when these changes take place. Also, I really recommend monitoring the HHS website as well. I tend to check it at least once every month or two to make sure there's no updates. And then here is a little task list if you want to try to implement your own HIPAA plan and try to be in compliance. This walks you through the process and provides some additional resources for that. And finally, we have our references. And so these are all of the references. And here's the HIPAA journal if you ever want to connect with the HIPAA journal, and some additional resources that I use to create this training. I hope that this information has been helpful. Please reach out if you have any questions or concerns. I will update this if and when the changes do take effect. I will be monitoring that very closely. And that is all I have for you today. I hope you have a wonderful day.